I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. I would like to address you today as one of the key stakeholders and movers and shakers in this agenda item. And it's in that capacity I'm speaking because of the fact that the Syrian Golan Territory is also occupied. And given that reality, I would welcome it if you indulge me in allowing to make this statement in full. More than 70 years have elapsed since the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory, following the misery of many millions of Palestinians who were expelled from their country, ripped from their homes, to see their homes despoiled and demolished. More than 2 decades have elapsed since the determination of certain countries and certain members of the Security Council to pursue the end of legitimizing this hateful and odious Israeli occupation, which began on the 5th of in 1967 to occupy the Syrian Golan Territory. These initiatives were crowned with the rollout of initiatives and provocative steps. And so the question that we must ask ourselves now is how many decades must the Israeli occupation be allowed to continue until certain are prepared to admit finally that the Security Council must take serious action to put an end to what is an occupation? How many more victims' lives must be lost before some are convinced that the Israeli occupation of Arab territories is the root cause of instability in our region? There is a long list of similar questions that I could ask. President, my government would like to confirm its long-standing position of principle of support for the Palestinian people in their drive towards self-determination and their aspiration to the creation of an independent state covering the entire Palestinian territory with Jerusalem as its capital, guaranteeing the right to return of Palestinians in line with Resolution 194 of 1948. Any measure which seeks to undermine these rights is to be considered null and void. They are steps that will threaten peace and security in the world. The apartheid law adopted by Israel, called the Law of the Nation, is such a measure that runs counter to Resolution 194. And a similar measure that undermines Resolution 194 is the United States of America twin measures to move the capital to move their representative in Israel to Jerusalem and to cut off the financing of UNRWA. These steps undermine the resolutions of both the General Assembly and the Security Council. Israel continues to occupy a cherished part of our territory in the Syrian Golan. The Syrian people there continue to suffer from that Israeli occupation and from the practices of repression and aggression meted out by the occupying power. Israel has protected terrorist organizations and lent logistical and direct military support to these terrorist organizations. And they have launched repeated attacks against Syrian territory, and they have in so doing failed to respect the disengagement agreement of 1974. They have also exposed UNDOF's forces to great danger as a result of these terrorist activities, which continue to go on unchecked in the occupied Syrian Golan. Thus, I would like to share with you that the occupying forces on Monday, the 8th of October 2018, issued such an unjust verdict against a Syrian activist, Subti al-Maket, who is the Mandela of Syria. They decided to imprison this gentleman for 11 years. Can you believe that? It is the truth. 11 years. And the only reason for this military court verdict on the 8th of October of 11 years was because he had sought to document, including through photos, the activities of the occupying Syrian forces, twinned with activities of the al-Nusra Front in that part of the occupied Syrian Golan. Civilian infrastructure as well as military infrastructure have been the target of Israeli actions in Syria, and this is proof of a new phase in Israel's exercise of state-sponsored terrorism. Israel is setting itself as a criminal and a murder of civilians on the same scale as al-Nusra Front and Daesh. They have evacuated thousands of white helmet agents. a terrorist organization that it has been sponsoring. It evacuated these White Helmets activists to neighboring countries so that they continue on the terrorist attacks against Syria. All of this unhindered action by Syria goes unmarked in reports issued by senior officials from the United Nations. As we heard this morning, UN officials spoke of incendiary kites coming from Gaza, but they made no report or remained mute on Israel's operations with terrorist organizations in the occupied Syrian Golan that should be covered and demilitarized under the UNDOF agreement. In its Resolution 497, adopted unanimously by the Security Council, the Security Council made it clear that Israel's decision taken on the 17th of December 1951, that of imposing Israeli jurisdiction on the occupied Syrian Golan, is a null and void decision in international law which has no legitimacy. The Resolution 497 that you yourselves as the Security Council adopted called upon Israel, the occupying power, to reverse all measures and decisions taken to occupy the Syrian Golan and to do so immediately. And I would like to recall you that happened in 1981, December 1981. That Resolution 497 called upon the Security Council to provide a report within 2 weeks from the date of the adoption of the resolution to the Security Council on the implementation of the provisions of said resolution. In the interim, you decide that if Israel did not respect the provisions of that resolution, the Security Council would meet on an exceptional basis, no later than the 5th of January 1982, to examine in depth necessary measures to be taken in line with the Charter of the United Nations in the result of Israel's inactivity. Under the principle of international law, I ask the following question to this august Security Council. 37 years after the adoption of the Resolution 497, 37 years after the adoption thereof, what is the current status of this resolution? Why has it not been implemented and followed up on? Why haven't you compelled Israel to put an end to the occupation of the Syrian Golan as called for in that Resolution 497? This Security Council should have enacted a further resolution in January of 1982 to follow up on 497. Nearly 37 years have elapsed since then, with us waiting for your Security Council to implement Resolution 497, and nothing is done. Colleagues ask questions about why conflict persists in the Middle East. Why is there conflict in the Middle East? What is the root cause of the violence in the Middle East? And they ignore the fact that we are still waiting for a response from the Security Council for 37 years, the implementation of a resolution of the Security Council that would free Syrian Golan from Israel occupation and which would liberate Israel from Jerusalem from Israeli occupation and would create a Palestinian state. And it's the failure to follow up on all of that which are the root causes of the war and the violence, the conflict that you're still seeing in the region, the failure to follow up on those steps taken, the release of Syrian Golan, the release of Jerusalem from Israeli occupation and the setting of a Palestinian state. We deny the ability of the Israeli occupying power to carry out call elections to establish local councils, as they call them, in the Syrian Golan. The inhabitants of the Syrian Golan and Syrians themselves reject all Israeli repressive measures seeking to impose Israeli jurisdiction on them, including the organizing of these local councils, which took place in October. I would like to recall that this month Mr. Mladenov made no comment on that step taken by the Israeli occupying power to set up their own jurisdiction in the Syrian Golan through these local councils. It is unacceptable that the United Nations and the member states of this body continue to deal with this issue of odious occupation as if it was simply a matter of routine, without taking any serious concrete action which would lead to concrete tangible outcomes, particularly after the declaration on the 8th of October of the Prime Minister of the Israeli entity. Statements made by the Israeli Prime Minister which make it very clear that Israel has no intention of respecting the Charter, and it is fully comfortable with violating Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 497. They say that the Prime Minister of Israel said that Israel's presence in the Syrian Golan is a legitimate presence based on ancient rights. The Israeli presence in the Syrian Golan is a reality that the international community must acknowledge and accept. And he's said that as long as I'm in office, the Syrian Golan will remain under occupation and Israeli sovereignty until the end of time. End of quote of the words of the Israeli Prime Minister on the 8th of October. This very serious statement and all the serious events in recent days in the Syrian Golan did not attract the attention of Mr. Mladenov, who passed completely over it in his statement. He did not mention it at all. He made no reference to the various resolutions of the Security Council which call upon the occupying power in the Syrian Golan to put an end to its occupation of Arab territories. Nothing was said by Mr. Mladenov about this in his statement. It was not referred to in his report. We therefore feel ourselves compelled to come to the conclusion that Mr. Mladenov has turned his serious role of special coordinator into the simple role of a bread and butter journalist. He is not doing serious work. I would recall that the General Assembly issued a resolution making it clear that the chief of the acts of aggression in the Middle East is the occupation, and all who keep silent on this occupation by Israel are therefore partners in this aggression. We condemn all those who seek to turn all of these sessions of the Security Council into simple displays of cinema, simple playing to the gallery, instead of doing the serious work of putting an end to the Israeli occupation of Arab territories. And we call upon those who are seeking to carry out alternate wars and proxy wars in our region to override the free determination of our people. Then I would say that you are the enemies of development, and we will stand against you. We're determined to liberate our territories with all the tools available to us through the provisions of the Charter and through the resolutions of the Security Council, and we shall carry on that good fight as long as it is necessary. We are the rights holders, and the law and right is on our side. Thank you very much, President.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of the